Do you know who real God is? According to the principles of Advaita Vedanta, the concept of God transcends specific deities such as Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma, or any other religious figures. It is not limited to natural elements like the wind, sun, or moon, nor is it confined to societal roles like the Brahmana or the king. Furthermore, it is not associated with individual identities, including oneself or others, and it does not align with things like the mind or the intellect. That splendor or devanam, which is not made, and which has neither beginning nor end, is referred to as real God or real Deva. God does not have a form, and he is not divided up into parts by the objects. That alone is deserving of worship, and that alone is everything else there is. One is encouraged to worship the form rather than the formless God if they are unable to worship the formless God. The latter produces a limited amount of results, whereas the former bestows an unlimited amount of joy. A pleasure garden is abandoned in favor of a thorny bush by the person who chooses to disregard the infinite and focus instead on the finite. Sages, on the other hand, will occasionally worship a form in a light-hearted manner. In point of fact, the only thing that continues to exist, even after the dissolution of the universe, is the infinite consciousness, also known as Siddhaksa. This consciousness is completely devoid of objectivity. All of these mountains, the entire world, the firmament, the self, the jiva or the individuality, and all of the components that go into making up this world are nothing more than pure consciousness. Where were all of these things before the so-called creation, when there was nothing but this pure consciousness that existed? Simply put, concepts like space, akasa, supreme or infinite space, absolute space, creation and consciousness are all just words, and they all point to the same reality in exactly the same way that synonyms do. The dualities that are experienced in dreams are illusory for the same reason that the dualities that are implied in the creation of the world are illusory. During the dream state, objects appear to exist and perform their functions in the inner world of consciousness. However, during the wakeful state, these same objects appear to perform their functions in the outer world of consciousness. Both of these states are characterized by the absence of significant activity. Even though consciousness alone is what constitutes the reality when one is in the dream state, it is also the only thing that makes up the substance when one is awake. That is the realm God, that is the highest truth, that you are what I am, and that is all there is to it. The worship of that Lord is the only worship that is genuine, and through that worship, one can accomplish anything. He is undivided and indivisible, non-dual, and neither fashioned nor created by activity. Achieving him does not require the exertion of any outside effort. The joy that comes from him being adored is inexhaustible. Only those people whose intelligence has not been awakened and who are immature like young boys are permitted to worship a form that is merely external to themselves. Flowers are used in worship when a person lacks self-control and other characteristics like this. However, this type of worship is pointless, just as adoring oneself in an external form is pointless. However, these immature devotees find fulfillment in worshipping an object that they have created. They may even earn rewards that are completely pointless as a result of their worship. But what enlightened people's worship? The Lord deserving of worship is in fact the one who sustains the entirety of creation, who is beyond thought and description, and who is even beyond the ideas of all and collective totality. Whoever it is that is undivided and indivisible by space and time, whose light illumines all the objects, and who is pure and absolute consciousness, is the only one who is referred to as God. He is that intelligence which is beyond all of its parts, which is concealed in everything that is, which is the being in everything that is, and which deprives everything that is of their being that is, which obscures the truth. This Brahman exists in a place that is neither being nor not being. That which is denoted by the symbol Om is both God and the truth. It can be found in every place, much like the heart of a plant. Only that unadulterated awareness, which resides in each of us, as well as in every god and goddess, can be referred to as God. Holy One, even the gods who are endowed with form are nothing more than that one, undifferentiated consciousness. The entirety of the universe is composed of nothing but consciousness. That is God, and that is all I am. Everything is attained from and through him. That God is not far away from anyone, nor is he difficult to approach. Rather, God is permanently ensconced within the human form, and his presence permeates all of space. He is responsible for everything, including eating and maintaining the structure of the whole thing. He moves, he breathes, and he is familiar with each and every part of the body. He is the light in which all of these limbs function, and he is the light in which all of these different activities take place. He lives in the dark recesses of a person's own heart. In spite of the fact that he is incomprehensible to the mind and the 5 faculties of perception, because he transcends them both, for the sake of education, he is referred to as consciousness. Therefore, even though it seems as though he is responsible for everything, the reality is that he is not. That consciousness is unadulterated and appears to participate in the goings-on of the world to the same degree that spring does in the flowering of trees. Without consciously understanding that it is doing so, this consciousness serves in some places as space, in other places as a jiva, in other places as action, in other places as substance, and so on. Even though it is described in a variety of different ways, this consciousness is still just one cosmic mass of consciousness. This is similar to how all of the different oceans are actually just one indistinguishable mass of water. It is the same consciousness that imbibes the experience, which is like honey gathered by the restless mind, which is like the bee. This consciousness resides in the body, which is like a lotus flower. Even as eddies and whirlpools form in the ocean, all of these different beings that make up this universe, such as the gods and the demons, the mountains and the oceans, and so on and so forth, all flow within this infinite consciousness. Even the wheel of ignorance, which is responsible for the revolving of the wheel of life and death, revolves within this cosmic consciousness, whose energy is in a state of perpetual motion. The annihilation of the demons was accomplished through the power of consciousness, which took the form of the Hindu god Vishnu with 4 arms. Even as a thunderstorm that is accompanied by a rainbow helps to relieve the heat that is emanating from the ground below, it is only consciousness that can assume the form of Shiva and Parvati, as well as Brahma, the creator, and the myriad other beings. This consciousness is analogous to a mirror in that it can, so to speak, contain a reflection within itself, without being altered in any way by the reflection itself, without going through any changes in the substance itself. This consciousness manifests itself as each and every one of the uncountable beings that inhabit this universe. The infinite consciousness is analogous to an invasive species. Asterisk, the dormant tendencies of a vast number of jiva are dispersed throughout it. Wants and needs are the buds. The filaments are the products of creations in the past. The creeper is composed of both sentient and insentient beings as components. Although it gives the impression of being many, the one has not actually multiplied into many. All of these things are conceived of, expressed, and carried out as a result of this infinite consciousness. The only thing that shines as brightly as the sun is the infinite consciousness. It is the infinite consciousness that manifests as the bodies which appear to be alive but are, in reality, lifeless. These bodies interact with one another in order to have different experiences. This consciousness is analogous to the typhoon, which cannot be seen in and of itself, but allows sand particles and dust to rise and dance as if they were doing so on their own. This consciousness, in a sense, casts a shadow in itself, and this shadow is considered to be tamas, also known as inertia. In this very body, thoughts and ideas give rise to deeds, which are performed in accordance with this very consciousness, of course. However, in this state of consciousness, it is not possible to experience anything, not even an object that is directly in front of oneself. Without this consciousness, the body simply would not be able to function or even exist. It expands, it contracts, and it consumes. This consciousness is responsible for the creation of all movable and immovable beings in the universe, as well as their continued existence. Only the infinite consciousness itself can be found. Nothing else can be found. Only consciousness itself can be said to have emerged from consciousness. The same way that a rock does not contain any oil. In pure consciousness, there is no such thing as the diversity of sight, seer and seen, nor is there the diversity of doer, act and action, nor is there the diversity of knower, knowledge and known. In a similar vein, the distinction between I and you, as well as the one and many, is one that is made verbally. Upon further investigation, all of these vanish, leaving behind only the original, unaltered state of consciousness. The nature of consciousness is unaffected by change, and it can never lose its pristine state. One can realize this infinite consciousness, which is unaltered and non-dual, by entering the self-luminous inner light and focusing inwardly. It is unadulterated and unchanging. It is unthinkable and ever-present at the same time. Only consciousness itself is the only thing that exists behind all appearances and behind all experiences. Thought gives rise to action. Action is a function of the mind, and the mind is conditioned consciousness. However, consciousness is not subject to any conditions. The vehicle of consciousness is called jiva. The vehicle of ego sense is called jeva. Intelligence is the vehicle of ego sense. The mind is the vehicle of intelligence. Prana is the vehicle of the mind. The senses are the vehicle of prana. The body is the vehicle of the senses, and motion is the vehicle of the senses. Karma can also be thought of as action. Because prana serves as the mind's transport mechanism, when prana leaves the body, it takes the mind with it. However, when the mind is merged in the spiritual heart, prana stops moving, and the mind enters a state of quietude. Puryastaka is the term that refers to the consciousness's own reflection within itself. Puryastaka is simply the mind, but others have provided more in-depth explanations of its components, including the 5 elements, the inner instrument, also known as the antakarana, the organs of action, the senses, ignorance, desire and karma. Linga Sarira is another name for it, along with the name subtle body. When the mind is deprived of the support it requires, it is left to fend for itself within the self. When the Puryastaka has lost all of its supports, it is complete. It reaches a quiescent state, at which point it becomes immobile. When the lotus of the heart folds in on itself, the Puryastaka is no longer able to function. On the other hand, when the lotus opens, the Puryastaka does. When the Puryastaka stops working, the body passes away. As long as it continues to work, the body will continue to live. This cessation can be brought on by an inner conflict of some kind between the impurities and the inner awakening. When one's heart is only filled with pure vasana, or tendencies, all conflicts come to an end, and in their place is harmony, liberation, and longevity. If this is not the case, the subtle body will select another suitable individual, after the death of the body to carry out the hidden vasam. As a result of these vasana, the Puryastaka forgets its true identity as pure consciousness and instead forges new links with the new subtle body. The concept of diversity is absurd and unattainable, given that there is only one omnipresent and infinite consciousness present at all times. The idea that a goblin exists is what gives rise to the creature. Belief in the diversity serves as the foundation for it. When one becomes aware of the non-dual being, the dualistic experience immediately dissolves. It is impossible to adequately express what it is like to experience, as it is all-encompassing bliss and perfect tranquility. It is Om in its purest form. It is beyond all comprehension. It is the best there is. The Supreme Being, also known as the Infinite Consciousness, is, in a sense, the father of Brahma, who is known as the Creator, and Vishnu, who is known as the Preserver. Amongst others, Shiva is known as the Redeemer. Only that limitless awareness deserves our adoration and worship. Nothing else compares to it. However, inviting it to participate in the worship is pointless. No mantras are of any use in its worship, because it is one's immediate closest, which is themselves, and because of this, it does not require an invitation. It is the self that is always present in all of us. The sole and most effective form of worship is the awakening of this limitless consciousness, which occurs without any effort whatsoever. In conclusion, the true God is neither a deity nor an external entity. Rather, the real God is the formless, undivided consciousness that permeates all of existence. This formless consciousness is the ultimate reality, the only entity deserving of worship, and the origin of unending happiness for all of existence. This consciousness is the ultimate goal, one that transcends religious, cultural, and philosophical boundaries, and the journey to understand and realize it is the ultimate goal.